an Israeli ground invasion into Gaza is imminent. Israel has called up more than 300,000 reserves to fight Hamas. It's the largest military mobilization in 50 years.
Well, reports of unspeakable horror from the terrorist massacre continue to emerge, while the desperate families of hostages plead for help for their loved ones. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports on this escalating crisis.
Rocket fire from the Gaza Strip continued to pummel southern Israel on Wednesday, day 5 of the Israel-Hamas war. Meanwhile, Israel says it struck at least 80 Hamas targets in Gaza overnight, while Israeli ground forces mass on the border for an imminent invasion. The death toll in Israel continues to climb. More than 1,200 civilians dead, 170 soldiers slain, and more than 3,500 Israelis wounded. In the Israeli community of Kfar Aza, soldiers discovered what's been described as a massacre.
You see the babies, the mother, the fathers in their bedrooms, in their protection rooms, and how the terrorists kill them. It's not a war. It's not a battlefield. It's a massacre. It's a terror activity.
Major General Itai Veruv led the 3-day campaign to retake Kfar Aza after Hamas militants invaded.
It's something that I never saw in my life. It's something that we used to imagine as our grandfather and grandmother in the pogrom in Europe and other places.
They must have shed their humanity, and what's left is something inhuman. To see baby carriages with bullet holes in them and blood. Who goes up to a baby and kills a baby? Who kills a mother?
IDF spokesman Major Doron Spielman says proportionally, it would be like 25,000 people dying in America.
It's the same rage, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Hamas. It's this absolute disregard for human life. And I know for our soldiers and for our people and the mothers and fathers like myself, we have to see this because the road ahead is going to be very difficult. And if we do not take that road, this would happen again.
One of the most horrifying elements of this war has been the capture of Israeli civilians and soldiers who were then taken by Hamas into the Gaza Strip, and their fate is unknown. Some of them were American citizens.
6:30 in the morning, Hamas terrorists began rampaging through the kibbutz. Those people that they saw outside, the early risers, were murdered on the spot.
Jonathan Dekolchen and his son Sagi are both American citizens. Sagi is missing after he and others went to defend their community of Nir Oz.
What we would like is maximum effort to at least be able to tell us what befell our loved ones by any means possible. The United States government, in all of its agencies, has friends in the world that Israel does not have.
In the north, concerns of a second front opening up. Israel struck Lebanese territory on Wednesday after terrorists fired anti-tank missiles across the border at Israeli troops. There are also reports of Palestinian factions in Syria firing rockets into Israel. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
Well, CBN Middle East Bureau Chief joins us, Chris Mitchell. He joins us now live from Israel. So, Chris, we're now seeing a unity government form. Just a few days ago, a week ago, it looked like things were going into some kind of paralysis on the government, but they're now saying there's a unity government. So tell us, how is that going to work?
Well, right now, in about an hour, Gordon, they're going to be a security cabinet meeting. They haven't quite finalized the negotiations about the unity government. We hope that's going to come soon. I know a number of Israelis, most Israelis, want to see that. What it means here in Israel, it presents a united front. This is a parliamentary system. So what's going to happen would be the opposition will join the coalition and present a unity government, an emergency unity government. It's been done many times in Israel's history, about 9 times, for example. During the Six-Day War, there was a unity government. The question right now, will it be a national unity government or a national emergency government? The difference being that a unity government will bring all of the parties together, but the emergency government will just be something for the temporary crisis that Israel's facing. This division is something Israel has experienced for more than 3 years. And now many are praying that Israel will be unified as it faces its greatest crisis in decades, and that there be as one.
All right. Well, as shock gives way to grief and then to anger, what's the attitude of the Israeli people towards ground action in Gaza?
Well, first of all, Gordon, the shock, the massacre you saw in Kfar Aza, it's like losing their firstborn. And, I've heard the phrases like, we haven't heard this since the Holocaust. And as the general said, this is reminiscent of the pogroms that Jewish people have faced in Europe and the former Russia. And some people, it reminds them of the scripture in Jeremiah 31:15. It says, "Thus says the Lord, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children because they are no more." Well, there's a lot of Rachels here in Israel today. On Saturday, Gordon, they were shocked, confused. Then they were traumatized, angry, and now they're horrified. But I would also say right now for Israelis that they're unifying around defeating this enemy and fighting for their survival. And I would say that's now the rallying cry of the country. As Doron Spielman said in that piece, we need to see what Hamas has done because it's a hard road ahead. And that's certainly why Christians need to be praying for Israel and the peace of Jerusalem at this time.
Well, Chris, thanks for your insights. And I'll just underline for everyone watching the quote from President Eisenhower I used on Monday. I don't think Gaza's quite ready. Hamas certainly doesn't seem to be ready for the full fury of an aroused democracy. As Israel unifies, they're going to make sure Hamas will never be able to do this again. Well, we're joined now by Jonathan Conricus. He's the spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces. So, Jonathan, we're seeing troops, tanks being massed at the border. How soon will they invade, and can you tell us what their mission is?
Yes, thank you for having me. Of course, I won't be able to address your first question about timing for obvious reasons, but I can say that we have mobilized infantry, armor, artillery, logistics, combat intelligence, and combat engineering troops, to name a few, and they are preparing for their missions for the next stage of operations against Hamas in Gaza.
How is the IDF going to deal with the situation because there are so many hostages being held in Gaza? I assume there are rescue attempts going to be made, but it looks like Hamas is going to use these hostages as human shields. How will the IDF respond to that?
Yes, the complexity of the situation is unprecedented. Never before have we faced such a situation where so many Israelis are at the hands or at the mercy of a ruthless terror organization. By the way, many of the hostages are dual nationals. Americans, Brits, Germans, French, Italians, Brazilians, and many other nationalities. And some are not even Israelis. There are Thai workers that were abducted for I don't know what reason from the part of Hamas. Maybe only, as a show of force and that they could take these people. But the military reality is that we will have to focus on dismantling Hamas's military capabilities. That is what the IDF will be doing and focusing on as this operation evolves and goes forward. We're currently striking from the air quite significantly. And as the operation unfolds, we will continue and develop our military operations.
Any analysis on the intelligence failures? I'm seeing a lot in the press about misdirection by Hamas. They were saying on their private communication channels that they knew Israel was listening in and they weren't intending to launch anything. All the while they were absolutely planning it. And then cell phone towers were targeted to cut off communications. Any analysis at this point on this intelligence failure?
Yeah, there is definitely analysis, and we're, the IDF for sure is eager to learn and understand, mostly to make sure that it won't happen again. And beyond what you asked, the intelligence fellow, there are many questions being asked by Israeli civilians, Israeli civil society, as to how and why this happened, and many other very tough questions. They will get answered by the IDF in due time, and the people of Israel deserve those answers, but they will be given at the end of the fighting, once the last Hamas terrorist is either dead or has surrendered, and we will have dismantled Hamas's military capabilities. Then will come the time of all of those after-action reviews and of reckoning and of understanding how it happened and how we can prevent it in the future.
How are you going to deal with the international community? Because I've already heard from the EU, then the United Nations, their human rights chief has already condemned Israel's actions in Gaza. I find it absolutely incredible. You haven't even had time to bury your dead, and they're already critiquing you. This makes no sense. Are you prepared for the international community? And is any way going to discourage you on the mission?
Yeah, I totally agree with you about the absurdity of the situation. The Israeli blood has barely dried, and already there are people and organizations that find it fit to focus on Israeli activities. I find that actually despicable. I would like to say that we are, however, strengthened by significant shows of support from around the world, capitals being lit in Israeli colors, and wall-to-wall signs of support by parliaments and by, of course, the US Congress and the Senate, and clear, unequivocal statements by many of the free and democratic countries around the world saying that we stand with Israel and Israel has every right to defend itself. And I, as a person, I always try to focus on the good. And the good in this case is US support and many other free countries that understand the severity, the unprecedented situation here, and are standing by Israel, not only in words, but in deeds. Very welcoming to see US Central Command issuing a statement and moving troops. There is a US battle group on its way in the Eastern Mediterranean to make sure that all of the other enemies understand that attacking Israel at this time would be a very foolhardy endeavor. And we will continue to fight the international fight for legitimacy, to be able to allow ourselves to continue to fight and defend ourselves on the ground. Like always, people, for some not understandable reason, have this urge to criticize Israel. But we will focus on the job, and we will not be deterred or weakened, and our resolve will be strong until we dismantle Hamas's military capabilities in Gaza and make sure that this will never happen again.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, but I just have to say my concern is that Hezbollah will be mobilized, will attack from southern Lebanon, and I've already heard from someone in the Israeli government that this is actually a war with Iran. It's not a war against Hamas. Hamas is just a proxy. How likely do you think it is that this could erupt into a much larger conflict?
You're very correct. The fact that we are fighting on the ground in Gaza does not minimize the fact that we are focusing and very vigilant on what's happening in the north. There have already been attacks against Israel from the north, including Hezbollah firing anti-tank missiles multiple times towards Israeli troops. We have responded, and so far it hasn't crossed a certain threshold of casualties and severity, but we have mobilized troops to the north. We are prepared and have lots of reserve, special forces, infantry, artillery, and armor. But Israel is now, we could say, have active combat operations on 3 fronts. Gaza, the primary sector of operations, and then currently looking at operations on the Lebanese front and on the Syrian front. All of these fronts have been active. There has been fire towards Israel, and we have troops and vigilance prepared for any eventuality. And yes, the common denominator of all of these fronts is Iranian money, Iranian guidance, Iranian weapons, and most importantly, Iranian vicious ideology, which tries to use proxies in order to fight against Israel.
Well, Jonathan Conricus, thank you for your time with us, and thanks for coming and being on. We stand strong with you, and we stand with you as you eliminate Hamas. It's time for Hamas to no longer exist.